Okay, Jonathan.
Thank you, Angela, and welcome to the October Bar Talk. Can you put the slide up? The October Bar Talk, which is on emotional well-being, continuing our theme for 2024 of attorney well-being. And this is, as we've done in the past, one of the days of the Institute for Wellbeing and Law's Wellbeing Week in Law. And I'll introduce the speakers in a second, but first, Angela, why don't you provide the MSBA updates?
Thank you. So I'm very happy to announce that we hired for our final open position of membership coordinator. Her name is Jennifer Altmiller. She goes by Jen. We're extremely happy to have her. She started on September 30th, so she is very brand new. So now your MSBA staff is at 10 strong, and we are thrilled and hopefully can get back to doing what we do best. We've been short-staffed for a couple of years now, and so it's a really good feeling. Dues renewal is open right now. When this slide is posted at the end of this edition of Bar Talk, you can click on that link on renew your dues today, or you can just visit our website and sign in so you can get to your portal and renew your dues today. And finally, some important dates that we have coming up. Legal Year in Review is on for November 21st at the Augusta Civic Center. Our brand new CLE director, James Westoff, will be leading the charge on that. He's doing a great job wrapping his arms around things. And then we have the Winter Bar Conference on January 22nd through the 24th at the Westin Portland Harbor View. Molly Rogers, who is still our fairly new membership director, has wrapped her arms around that. And we're already starting that planning. In fact, we sent out a request for proposals this week, so please make sure you submit those. And finally, next Bar Talk will be on November 14th, and we'll be focusing on occupational and intellectual well-being.
Thank you, Angela. And I just really want to thank Angela for all the hard work she's done this year to get the Bar Association fully staffed. It's a really exciting time to have that full staff who will be able to do everything from planning our conferences to getting our sections more active. So I'm very excited that we have the full staff now. I'd like to introduce our emotional well-being speakers. I thought that we would tackle emotional well-being in October because we're on the cusp of the holidays, and also end of year is often a very stressful time in law firms. So I thought maybe we could get ahead of that stress and focus on emotional well-being today. So I invited Kim Ringler, who's an attorney in Waldwick, New Jersey, but also a very recent member of the Maine Bar and Maine State Bar Association. So she'll be joining us soon, practicing in Maine. And Paula Shagin, who's at Green Button Counseling in Franklin County, to reprise their presentation or a portion of their presentation from the Summer Bar Conference. So Kim and Paula, please take it away.
Great, thank you very much. I'm trying to figure out my gallery view so I don't see all 25 of us. I've got you, Angela, and you, Jonathan, but not you, Shagin. But you're there, right?
I'm here, and maybe yours is set to switch to speaker, so it'll probably switch around depending who's talking. Is that what's happening?
Yes, that's better. Okay, now you're talking and now we're set. So I am indeed a seasoned practitioner, and I'm delighted to say that I am a brand new member of the bar in Maine, and I'm thrilled about it and happy to be participating in practice as well as the state bar activities. We're grateful that the presentation in Bar Harbor was well received. So we have altered, amended, and truncated that more lengthy presentation to highlight some of the important skills and considerations to maintain and enhance your well-being while maintaining your ethical obligations. So my contribution to this discussion is candidly stuff you already know, I hope, which is there are various ethical obligations that need to be honored and met and cannot be if your mental health is a mess. My co-presenter is a licensed clinical social worker in Maine, licensed also in New Hampshire and New Jersey and Massachusetts, so she can see individual clients via clinical health, via telehealth in any of those locations, and doing some in-person programming at the farm, the Green Button Bog Pond Farm in Western Maine. She has a decade of experience with mental health in different settings, from teenagers at risk to lawyers crumbling from the stresses of our profession to, I don't know what else, she'll give you a better understanding of the scope of her practice. But it's our pleasure to collaborate and talk to you about mental health. And I'll begin by saying the obvious, that cognitive functioning and other types of functioning are deeply impacted when there are impediments in place preventing you from feeling good, feeling adequate. And our duties include being competent, doing things correctly, being diligent, doing things on time and intensively, appropriately, and communicating both with our clients, with our colleagues, with our adversaries, with the fact finders, with organizations, with staff. So these are the key obligations we have as lawyers. And Paula Shagin can talk to us about how we can do what's necessary to meet those obligations. Can you take it away?
Sure. You guys are already familiar with the RPC of competence, which is how we're going to start today. So this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's not a strictly wellness-based image, but maybe something you've seen or heard of elsewhere. But it's about the human needs in general, and sort of the way that the base of your pyramid's needs need to be met before you can focus on the next level up, etc. And so proactive planning to make sure that your basic needs are met can really improve the functioning of your psychological needs and your self-fulfillment needs. And I feel like that is incredibly critical for maintaining peak competence. So anticipating through reflection and self-awareness what your personal needs are and listening to your instincts and being able to proactively plan for situations that might increase symptomology or stress for you, to make sure that you are able to feel safe, that you're able to eat regularly. I know it's incredibly difficult sometimes to even just carve out time to stretch your limbs or get up from a desk or take a walk or eat a snack or stay hydrated. And that is the kind of proactive self-care you want to stay on top of in order to be able to continue to critical think clearly and quickly, and be able to function. So in terms of safety and security, that includes your psychological safety and security. It's very hard to even have appropriate word recall if your limbic system is being activated. So if you are feeling like you might be under distress, even if it's from a psychological or emotional trigger, it's harder to speak clearly. So learning how to regulate your body and calm yourself and be focused and in the moment because your needs are met and you're able to feel safe is going to improve your competence. And as Jonathan mentioned, this is a time of year heading into winter when proactive planning can really make the difference between something becoming, I'm a little more fatigued in the winter and I have to plan ahead better versus seasonal affective symptoms, which can get pretty severe and impact functioning in a much bigger way. So the proactive planning can be really helpful. And that means anticipating scenarios that might impair your functioning so that you can plan accordingly. So if you know certain situations stress you out, figuring out how do I navigate handling those situations ahead of time instead of sort of jump scaring yourself in the moment, even if it's something that's happened before. So knowing your own patterns.
I want to interject.
I could talk a lot about this.
Just with a comment. Paul and I have reviewed the data from a variety of studies of lawyers, and as you may know, we're in terrible shape compared to other professions and other jobs. There was a recent Bloomberg study that Paula pointed out to me, actually had some good news. I'll let her address that. But something that startled me, and it's apropos of feeling safe and safe in the workplace, is that in that new Bloomberg study, 1 out of 4 attorneys reported that there was bullying in their workplace, that they had experienced bullying, which is, who knows exactly
Very
how.
high. That's
Yes.
very high.
Yeah. Whatever the definition is in that study for being bullied, the fact that 25% of the responding lawyers said they were experiencing that really questions kind of our workplace. I think Maine is probably ahead of the curve, just based on the intimacy of our lawyer population, that we're less than 4,000 lawyers statewide. New Jersey, where I've been based, it's 70,000, but the collegiality index in Maine is higher. And of course, a lot of people love to be in the outdoors, and I think that can color the workplace attitudes. But be sensitive to the fact that, as Paula talks about your basic needs and your psychological needs, the workplace is an indicator of how you're going to feel and what you'll need to react to and prepare for.
Yeah, that's a great point. And as Kim mentioned, the Bloomberg study, so it had a graphic that said sort of like people who report a decline in functioning in 2024 versus people that report an improvement versus people who stayed the same. And it looks pretty intimidating, but if you add up the percentages, about 6% more people feel that they've improved this year as opposed to last year overall. So there's been 6% improvement overall
In mental
after,
health.
Balance scales. Yeah, in terms of reporting mental health symptomology and discomfort in that way. So I think largely work around awareness and increasing access to resources and task forces and committees who are addressing why lawyers in particular are sometimes reluctant to access those resources because of fear or limitations or stigma of other kinds. And a lot of times the majority, well, in the Bloomberg study, the majority reason why lawyers delayed or did not seek mental health assistance when they self-identified as needing it or feeling they would benefit from it was time. So not having enough time, not feeling that they had enough time for that was a primary reason why people did not access support. So that's a pretty interesting factor.
Well, I can put in a plug for practitioners like you who have telehealth. So, from the comfort of your bedroom early in the morning, it's possible to meet with a therapist in today's modern world. Diligence, I mentioned, and executive functioning and proactive planning are critical to being able to meet deadlines, to get the work done, to make sure that you are fulfilling your obligations.
And to that end, executive functioning, time management, not having enough time is all part of this. And this is a graphic that's actually more frequently used sort of with younger students because executive functioning skills are explicitly taught now in most schools, and they weren't not that long ago. So it's not a given if you feel like you struggle with task initiation, that you are just bad at that, or that you're lazy. And a lot of times struggles with executive functioning can manifest as negative self-talk or poor self-regard. People can feel that they've been called lazy, they must not be a hard worker, when in fact their procrastination is a protective coping skill that they've cultivated in order to avoid feeling unsafe, probably through risk of failure or perceived negative regard. So if you find that there are particular types of tasks that you're avoiding or that you're struggling with, maybe don't default to assuming that it's something you're bad at, and instead view it as a signal from your brain that you may need other support or other strategies in order to initiate, sustain, and complete the task. Sometimes it's just fatigue, right? Like you just are doing too much and you're exhausted. And so something that would take you 20 minutes if you were well fed, had a glass of water, and took a nap will take you 2 hours. And that's just not efficient. So if you spend an hour of that time napping, you'd still only spend half an hour working on the task. But somehow it's really difficult to allow yourself to take the time to invest in getting to peak functioning, even though overall investing that time in yourself on a day when you're busy is going to improve your efficiency throughout the day and is probably a worthwhile investment. So if you think of you as a highly honed vehicle, right? If you're a sports car, you need to make sure all the fluids are topped up, the tires are rotated, and you're checking the systems in order for it to perform effectively. Because if you run out of gas, but you've rotated the tires, you're still not going anywhere. So being able to view yourself as an asset that needs to be maintained and cultivated it can shift from some of the like martyr lens that some of us have internalized, that we have to sacrifice our own well-being in order to be viewed as professional or in order to be able to succeed. And that societal pressure, that societal lens is more and more being disproved. So in terms of actual data to support whether or not that makes sense, taking care of yourself is in fact professional and a good use of your time. That said, these executive functioning skills can really help you, especially because sometimes you have a deadline and you know you need a nap, but you have to push through, or you know you're not going to sleep anyway, or whatever it is, right? So metacognition, which is the skill of sort of thinking about your thinking, can be very helpful in terms of recognizing which, if any, of these areas you need to work on strengthening. And they are skills that you can cultivate. And a lot of times with intention, you can replace other coping strategies you've developed, which may no longer be adaptive. So they may be maladaptive, they're not serving you, or they're no longer healthy for you. But you developed them when you were younger and had limited resources and power. And that's what you had available. And so now it's become a default or a habit. So like procrastination is one of those things where it can be something that you cultivated when you were younger to protect yourself because you didn't have control over your own finances or space or time. And it was a way to have control and keep yourself safe from rejection. But now procrastination is something that actually harms you more than it protects you, and you need to cultivate other strategies. So that's something I help people with all the time, and I'm happy to speak more about.
Communication is the heart of practicing law. A friend of mine who's a retired judge is teaching a class at Rutgers Law School, and one of her students, I hope I'm not telling tales out of school, let's just say hypothetically, one of her students at some law school somewhere said they're in law school, but they don't really like conflict, so they want to do a type of law where there's no adversity. Maybe that exists, I'm not sure, but something that exists in every aspect of law practice is the need to communicate clearly on paper, in communicating and negotiating with adversaries, in presenting our case to whoever the fact finder is, whether it's a jury or a special master or an arbitrator or a judge. And so if your mental health is cracking, it will undoubtedly diminish your ability to communicate as fluidly and as effectively as is your norm. So we want to talk about some strategies and some insights into how you can enhance communication, and talk about communication styles as well to help you on your way.
So yeah, communication, whether you're struggling with your mental health or not, is always something that can be very critical to maintaining professional ethical standards, as well as just your own relationships, whether they're professional or personal. Verbal communication, I mean, lawyers tend to be very verbal, right? Like you have good words. You do the good stuff with the good words, right?
Undoubtedly.
So that's an that's an area that you have a lot of strength in, which is wonderful. Nonverbal communication, especially with in-person interactions, can be very, very helpful to cultivate an awareness of both your own in terms of how you're being perceived, and other people's, not only because it can improve clarity and efficiency, but also because it can help keep you safe if you work with scenarios where there's a lot of heightened emotion. That can be scenarios where being alert to things like gesture and posture can really make a difference in terms of your personal safety. The communication styles here in this little graphic of assertive, passive aggressive, aggressive, and passive. And I know aggressive is spelled wrong. That drives me crazy, but I couldn't change it in the graphic. It's not mine. I'm sorry. I'll switch it. But assertive is really the goal. So you want to aim for assertive communication, which usually leaves people feeling respected and heard, but also has made your needs very clear. And I find that a lot of times people feel that assertive is aggressive because they've been taught passive aggressive or passive styles to be more polite or nice. Particularly women practitioners often struggle with being assertive and feeling that that was appropriate and not too much. Statements are often softened by like, well, I think you might, or I feel like, but they're not actually conveying a feeling. They're just kind of softening what the statement they need to make is. So being able to be really clear and direct does not have to be aggressive. And the nonverbal components of communication can really make the difference here. If you're using a really loud volume to convey something, it often is perceived as more aggressive. Things like even if your shoulders are facing someone else's shoulders as opposed to slightly tilted can make a difference as to whether they respond defensively or whether they're able to hear you. So learning about how your body moves in space and observing how other people's bodies and faces move in space can help you be alert and communicate more effectively and have better outcomes. And this is very important to mental health because if you struggle with any kind of anxiety and there's any kind of social component, communication can be skewed in terms of your interpretation. You can often interpret neutral as negative when other people are communicating with you. You can have perceived negative judgment is more common, right? And so it's harder to be able to be assertive and clear if you feel that you're disliked or that you've messed up or that you don't know what you're doing because your anxiety is undermining your talent. So being able to sort through committing to listening to your instincts and being able to communicate your needs clearly versus the anxiety voice that may be impacting your judgment. And I statements, I think are really critical because a lot of times we are taught that our feelings are unprofessional and that having no feelings at all is the only way to manage in a courtroom, with a client, in an office. And actually feelings are part of the data set. Our feelings are really important signals from our brain. And so being able to convey your feelings is important, even if it's something that you feel a little more vulnerable about, but it is part of assertive communication. And so this is a structure. I don't know how many people know what Mad Libs is, but I always think of that where you like fill in the blank. So just being able to identify the feeling that you're experiencing and what is motivating it and what you need, if anything, externally in order to help you with that feeling or in order to be most effective. This is a good way to structure that, especially if you're newer to communicating feelings at all. So your feelings are valid. They are important. They are not the only reason you should make a decision, but they are part of the reason you should make a decision. So incorporating that as valuable data into how you interact with other people and how you communicate is a great place to start in terms of getting your needs met appropriately, whether it's at work or at home.
One of the corollaries for that communication process is that Paula was telling me that when people perform a task and then they're criticized for it, that's the old school way. Of course, that's how it happened. You know, I had wonderful mentors and teachers as a young lawyer, and there was, I would say, from my less informed point of view, there was no coddling. You were given an assignment, you did the assignment, and then it was ripped apart and you learned from the process. But maybe, Paula, you can speak about alternatives
Yeah.
to that
Yeah.
that promote. Yeah, because from a financial point of view, I know that's not today's topic, but retention of lawyers is important for economics in a law firm. And if people feel crushed, they're more likely to go elsewhere. And there's a fairly straightforward way to decrease the likelihood that somebody's going to feel crushed.
Yeah, so communicating clearly proactively or preemptively about what exactly you're looking for with regard to performance on a task, as opposed to giving feedback after the task, although certainly both are important, is often really helpful for people perceiving less conflict. So if you say, I need you to get this done and then I'll take a look, but you have a specific image in mind or you have particular standards, showing someone an exemplar of what that needs to look like or explaining explicitly what are the action steps you expect them to take in what timeline and how that needs to look before they've done it, as opposed to giving them feedback after they've done it, can really change whether people feel supported, and that you're encouraging and promoting their success, as opposed to whether you dislike them, which, you know, you would hope that feedback could be separate from perceptions of likability. But teaching styles have changed, and what a lot of people are used to is really explicit instruction on what they're expected to do. And so critical thinking is something that is harder and harder for people to access when they're in a heightened emotional state, and it's harder not to have an emotional response to anything that's being perceived as feedback. And neutral feedback is often perceived as negative, even though it's valuable and important to improve the performance of the staff you work with. So I hope that helps.
Well, we can pivot and go through our list of steps that are kind of general principles, and then we may have a few more minutes to talk about tips for managing both the upcoming holiday season and the shorter days and longer nights in terms of daylight, and year end and reviews and the pressure to get those billable hours in. But before we do that, it does take a metaphoric village to maximize or work towards maximization of attorney wellness. And it is a wonderful thing that the Maine State Bar, under Jonathan's leadership and other entities, are really taking seriously that it's a win-win. Back when you're talking about communication as a win-win with assertive speech, it's a win-win when lawyers are feeling well and taking care of their well-being. It's a win for them, and it's a win for the people who rely on them and their legal work. So if we each do our part to take self-care into our to-do list, as well as being an ally and contributing to whatever our work environments are, we can build that village of improved relationships and well-being. So be aware of the impact that perceived bullying, any kind of harassment or targeting can have on a colleague or on you. We had some data about that we presented in Bar Harbor, and it's pretty alarming how deleterious an impact those kinds of behaviors have on individuals and the workplace. It may be, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
why don't you go ahead with this?
Yeah, I know we only have a few minutes left here. So the self-care component and that self-awareness, the metacognition, figuring out and knowing what you need, thinking through and verbalizing your emotions, and what's driving them is really important to being able to self-regulate and be able to function. But community care is also important, because self-care sort of reinforces the concept of isolation, and self-care and isolation aren't going to solve community-based collective challenges. And particularly the data around lawyers is that isolation, partially due to the fact that confidentiality requirements are so high, is a real factor in terms of feeling like you are able to seek help, and also increasing symptoms of depression and anxiety because of that perceived isolation and actual isolation. So peer support is a totally valid place to start. If you don't have the time or means to see a clinical mental health professional, having someone that you just feel comfortable talking to about your mental health or spending time with in a way that feels supportive, where you're able to be yourself, is a really good place to start. There are structured groups, many of them free or low cost, that exist in Maine, which is very cool. But you can also just have a colleague you feel more comfortable with. Finding a therapist, I mean, I am a therapist, so I feel like I need to say that it's always important to have clinical support if you're noticing that you have a symptomology pattern emerging that is difficult for you to manage on your own. I also want to point out that technology is available, right? Some of the first line of defense things you can do individually and to support the people around you is to have apps that are data driven and can actually improve mental health. So Mood Tools is one I like to mention explicitly because it has embedded in it the most evidence-based safety plan that we use for suicidal ideation planning, prevention. And it's available to anyone, and it's free, and it's not very fancy or high tech, and I'm not getting paid anything to say this, but it is a great option, and it has embedded in the app a helpline and some other resources and exercises for regulating. Dailyo is a mood tracker, presently is a gratitude app, etc. There are a lot of options, and you can check out what works for you and read about most of them because people have tried them and reviewed them. Activities beyond work, so that your whole life isn't work, is also really important. And I know that that often is in opposition with that sense of not having enough time. But it's kind of like a chicken and egg situation where if you can manage to create enough bandwidth to cultivate something that fills your well outside of work, ideally socially, but in whatever way you want to take up painting alone in the wilderness with no one around you, that's still great. So finding that and the physical health component of being able to make appointments, follow through, make sure you're healthy and well, as well as move your body in a way that feels joyful and isn't a punishment. You know, some people go to the gym because they're punishing themselves or it's about weight loss. But if you can move your body in a way that feels joyfully to you, that goes a long way towards improving your mood, even if it's just 15 or 20 minutes a week. And we already talked about building community, and I think we're pretty much out of time, unfortunately.
Well, thank you all. Are there any questions in the chat? We'd be happy to address them. And if not, I think, no, I don't see any here.
No, I don't see any either.
Okay. Jonathan, Angela, is there anything else you'd like us to talk about? We were very punctual in starting, and we're punctual in wrapping up. But if there is anything else you'd like us to address before we sign off, happy to do so.
I just hope we can get the PowerPoint, number one. Number two, I'd also highly recommend the Maine Assistance Program, which is it can be very helpful and deals with all sorts of problems that lawyers have.
Thank you. Yes, that's an excellent. Paula mentioned that there are great resources in Maine, and that's
one of them. Yes.
Yeah, and predominant. It's for lawyers. It's confidential, and there are a variety of resources there. So that's thank you for that explicit reminder.
I don't know that God, I can't even talk anymore. Bar Talk is available on our website in the archives. So if we don't send out the PowerPoint, you can certainly still access it through the archives on our website, and that will be there. I think later today or sometime this week it will be posted in the archives. So thank you, and also yes, the Maine Assistance Program is a tremendous organization that does a lot of good things, and we are trying to grow that as part of the Wellbeing Task Force that is working on finding ways to help attorney well-being in Maine. And So you should continue to hear things about attorney well-being in the coming months as we continue to tackle this. Thank you so much, Kim and Paula, for this presentation. I'm really glad that you're able to do it, and very happy with all of the well-being things we've done this year and will continue to do. Thanks for all who have attended, and we will see you in November when we tackle the final of the well-being elements with occupational well-being. So thanks, everybody, and have a great week, and be well.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Angela, do you need me?